Hello and welcome to One Week, One Year, a podcast where we watch and discuss every year of film history in order, starting in 1895, the dawn of cinema, and this episode is 1938. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Ellie. I'm a film projectionist, and joining me as always is...
I'm Glenn Covell. I'm a filmmaker.
That's right. And we're back again for closing in on the end of the 1930s. How's it feel, Glenn? You ready to put a bookmark in this chapter? I don't know if that's the right metaphor.
Sure, yeah, why not? Yeah, I mean, 30s are a pretty fun and eventful decade of movies, but 40s got some big ones coming down the pipe.
You're a big noir guy, and I'm going to ask you some noir questions today.
Today, well, I guess we're getting into some proto-noir today. So.
Proto-noir. But that's getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. Glenn, how's it going? What's up? What have you been up to?
Well, as you can see, if you're watching this on YouTube, or that you, Chris, can see because you're on the webcam.
That's me.
I have a new camera set up, so my video is much crisper than it usually is, and I'm in a different room. I'm in my new home office, which is, you can probably tell by the audio, cavernously empty.
Yeah. If you're not watching on YouTube, he's in the Bat Cave. He's in the actual Bat Cave right now.
Yeah. And if you are watching on YouTube, there's a blank wall and a Temple of Doom poster behind me.
Which is apropos because we're talking about not Temple of Doom, but an Indiana Jones era for sure.
More of a Last Crusade era.
Crusade.
That takes place in 38. Yeah, I should have put my Last Crusade poster behind me because I have one of those too.
You should have done that. Let's start over. Let's do it again.
It's hard cut, and there's a Last Crusade poster behind me.
I've been just kind of sitting around doing a whole lot of nothing. Been getting really Dance Dance Revolution lately.
I've also mostly been sitting around doing nothing, so you're in good company there.
Yeah, and we're about to go to a wedding soon, so
True.
Maybe we'll be seeing each other. Well, we will be seeing each other soon. Maybe we'll record an in-person podcast finally.
Hey, yeah. I mean, we've done the one in Kansas.
Did we do Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, not in New York or here, but now that we've gotten all that aside, not that, you or I are unimportant, but what we're really here for is to immerse ourselves in that year, that special year of 1938. And we like to do that by giving ourselves a little bit of newsworthy context, what was happening in the year. So Glenn, take it away.
The news of the year, 1938. Samsung is founded in Korea as a trucking company. French filmmaker Georges Méliès dies at age 76. Gas eruptions are observed on the surface of the planet Mars. Germany occupies and annexes Austria. Hitting the shelves today, Action Comics #1, introducing a new character, Superman. Mightier than the sword, the ballpoint pen is patented in Britain. German boxing champ Max Schleming is knocked out in the first round by American Joe Louis. An unusually large meteor crash lands in Grover's Mill, New Jersey. The world speed record for steam is set by the locomotive Mallard. The synthetic yarn nylon is used for toothbrush bristles. Thousands of Jewish businesses are looted and burned by Nazi rioters across Germany during the Night of Broken Glass. The meteor in New Jersey appears to, in fact, be a huge metallic cylinder. The psychedelic LSD is first synthesized by Swiss chemist Albert Hofmann. Breaking news! Martians have invaded New Jersey. Oops, never mind. It was all a Mercury Theater radio production of The War of the Worlds by young upstart Orson Welles.
Thanks,
Good
Glenn.
bit. Good bit. Yeah, Orson Welles making a name for himself.
Yeah, and
maybe he'll make a movie one day.
and pour one out for Papa George.
George. Yeah.
I just found that I had the Hugo book right behind me.
Hey, so there you go.
Here's a picture of him, of his head exploding.
Our memorial to Papa George.
Papa George made movies.
Yes, he did.
We
Well,
stand Papa George on this
oh,
show.
100%. Except when, like, he's
Except for when he was racist.
yeah, except for when and when he was like hating on suffragettes and everything. But I don't know. I think it felt like he was just bandwagon jumping, you know.
It kind of, yeah.
Anyway, he's dead now, so let's talk about something else. We're gonna switch it over to our shorts, 1 week, one reel.
Let's keep it light.
To talk about, yeah, let's keep it light after awkwardly moving past the horrific Nazi things.
Yeah.
To talk about something adorable, which is
True.
a couple of Little Rascals shorts or our gang shorts that we watched.
Right, I guess like collectively they are known as like the Our Gang. It's used like presenting Our Gang in whatever the titles are. And the Little Rascals is like just I don't know. The Our Gang and Little Rascals names I'm confused about. Like,
yeah, Little Rascals I think was mostly
when.
something that was applied afterwards, like post haste to these Our Gang shorts.
I had never actually watched any Our Gang shorts.
Oh, really?
Before this, yeah. I like knew of the Rascals.
Mm-hmm.
Just through cultural osmosis. I remember growing up, I forget what movie it was on, but one of the VHS tapes I had a preview for the 90s Little Rascals movie on it.
Right.
But yeah, never saw that, never saw any of the original shorts. So this was my introduction to the Little Rascals as a piece of cinema history.
Nice.
What had you seen any before this?
I definitely, like, you know, in that era when you're like 5 and your dad is showing you things like Three Stooges, like I also saw Little Rascals along with Three Stooges. I don't have any clear memories of it, but I definitely watched a number of shorts when I was a kid.
Now that I think about it, I think I did actually see some shorts when I was like very young, but I don't remember them at all. So I might as well not have.
I might have seen the 90s movie. I don't remember. But I also watched at the Denver Silent Film Festival last year. They played a silent Our Gang short with live accompaniment, which was a lot of fun. It was one called The Big Show that had them dressing up as different as different silent movie stars, like Harold Lloyd.
Hey.
And I think there was like there was like maybe a Mabel Normand in there too or something.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I want to watch that now. But we're not talking about that one today.
No.
We were talking about two that we watched. One that was sort of from the kind of golden age of Our Gang shorts when they were being produced by Hal Roach, and then one from later 1938 when they switched over to MGM. The first one is called The Awful Tooth. Good pun title there. This is a sort of a dentist comedy.
Yes. Your classic dentist comedy. In fact, like maybe the most classic thing about it is that a kid wants to remove his tooth to get money. Which is a classic bit. It could have originated here, probably not, but you know.
Yeah, I mean that, like with everything in all of film history, I'm like, that was probably a vaudeville thing.
I don't know how many kids were on vaudeville, but I could imagine it being in the funnies.
The gang of rascals, Our Gang of Little Rascals, is introduced in this short.
That's
with their faces
title. Yeah.
Their faces smushed up on the front of a glass window, looking at baseball mitts and balls. They want to buy some baseball stuff, but they got no money.
Exactly what old-timey children love, you know? Let's throw a ball around.
Yeah. I mean, what else are you going to do in the Great Depression when you're a child?
Yeah.
And so they hatch a money-making scheme to sell their teeth to the dentist. Or not, to sell their teeth to the tooth fairy.
Yeah. They heard that one of them got 10 cents for his tooth under his pillow. and they're like, let's go to the dentist and remove all of our teeth and buy lots of stuff.
Yeah. And so they go to the dentist, and the dentist is like, decides to mess with them and freak them out a little bit and just be really scary.
Yeah, it's like it starts as kind of a fun joke, but it also turns very quickly into dentist horror.
Yeah.
Where one of them is literally strapped to the chair, unable to talk while he's making menacing noises and grinding and blades all around him, you know?
Yeah. Alfalfa, the one with the weird hair.
Yes.
He's sort of the fancy one. He's got a bow tie and like a piece of hair that sticks up in the back. I get his character though is that he's sort of like, he's the fancy one.
I honestly haven't watched enough Little Rascals to be able to tell you exactly what their characters are supposed to be. But
right. I was kind of trying to get a
that.
sense of like each of their personas, because it also seems like there is a lot of Rascals, and that not all of them show up in every short. There's like a sort of a pool of many Rascals that then each short will have like 5 in it.
Yeah. I think that like there are some fan favorites though who are in more than others. And then also they need to stay children, and this series has been going since the early 20s, and it goes for another I don't know, 7 or 8 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it's a rotating cast that also it rotates in and out children.
I don't know. How much do we want to get into? There's not a lot of plot in these. They're like, the dentist is scary, and then they get scared. They don't want to sell their teeth, and the dentist buys them the baseball stuff because he's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy who just wanted to take some time to traumatize children.
Yeah, he was just wanted to troll some kids real quick.
I was thinking at the beginning of the short, like it's going to be, it's going to be like a light roasting, you know. He's gonna say, these people, these kids, I gotta teach them a lesson. They don't want to rip all their teeth out, but he gets like real scary with it.
I mean, just thankfully it's psychological torture. He's not actually harming them in any way. He's just making scary sounds like where they can't see, so they think that he's gonna do something really painful.
And that's why you don't sell your teeth to buy baseball gear.
Exactly. There is a bit like there's the sort of dentist nurse. What is that called? Dental hygienist, dental assistant, who's kind of laughing in the background during a lot of these scenes, and that seemed very genuine to me. That like just the antics that were happening was making the actual actor laugh.
Yeah, it's good. It's like a charming, cute short. It's like a solid like one reel, half reel kind of situation. It's like 9 minutes long. This is like the perfect kind of thing to just like ease you into whatever you're about to watch in that kind of old, short before the movie kind of thing. Yeah. This and the other one, I think they're both great times. They're light and enjoyable.
Yeah, they're both like really genuinely like sweet and charming and innocent in a way that I feel like a lot of entertainment just isn't.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, it's kids doing silly stuff, and it's like, no, it's just that.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
like
just gonna enjoy 9 minutes of kids.
It gets in, it gets out.
Yeah,
it's great. Yeah, there's a dog, there's a pet monkey.
And it's not like saccharine too. I think that's
right,
something that would ruin it, is that like I wouldn't even say it has an edge to it, but it feels like proto Rugrats in a way. It's it's got this kind of like you're watching kids get into shenanigans, but it's not like too sweet, you know? It's like a little bit, I don't know, child friendly, edgy. You know?
Well, right. It has the edge that I feel like children getting into antics actually have when they're doing antics. Like, yeah, like they get hurt, or like, you know, things are a little scary, or a little, you know, it's, yeah, I feel like it does capture, I think, a sense of childhood that is fairly elusive, I would say, in like children's entertainment.
Yeah, yeah. Because a lot of children's entertainment is a little too safe. It's a little safer than this.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, like, there's nothing not kid friendly about this, but there's also nothing too kiddie about this that an adult couldn't enjoy it.
Yeah,
So
I thought it was very fun.
it's really good.
Yeah.
We can move on to the next one, I suppose, which is Impractical Joker.
No,
I mean,
it's just Practical Jokers. The little rascals are not as impractical as the Impractical Jokers are.
Oh,
they're just practical jokers.
Do we reveal your backstory here?
My backstory that I work on the show Impractical Jokers. I don't think that's. I feel like I've said that on the show before.
Well, that's part of why we picked this one, because of the name.
Yeah. Yeah, this one's sort of a prank comedy. One of the gang is doing pranks, and the rest of the gang gets annoyed and tries to play a prank on him, and it backfires. And a birthday cake. They try to put fireworks in his birthday cake, but then his mom is like, "Oh, you guys are his favorite friends. Why don't you hold the cake?" And they're like, "Ooh, but there's fireworks in there."
Classic, like, turn of the century children's shenanigans,
Yeah, putting fireworks in a birthday cake.
I think that, like, it actually has, like, a really good sense of tension, like, while he's holding the cake.
I mean, it's the Hitchcock thing of like
down,
the bomb under the table. Like, if you show the audience the bomb under the table, and so it's like there's like a couple of the kids who know that the bomb is in the cake, as well as the audience does. So yeah, you're like waiting. You're watching the candle go down, waiting for it to happen. While Alfalfa again is singing a song very scaredly.
Yeah. I think that's some of the best part of the scene is how terrified you can tell he is while he's singing, because he's being compelled to sing while he's holding a cake with a firecracker inside of it.
But that's the same. It feels very authentically childlike in that you could also imagine he's just scared because he doesn't want to sing. Right. Or because he's he's too much attention's on him. So he's like, and he's tense.
Well, and also, like, because they're children who adults don't listen to, they're in this situation where they have to hold this cake that they don't want to, they can't say no when an adult told them, hold this cake, and sing for
you have
2
no
minutes.
say in it. Yeah.
You got anything else on that gang?
Two things that kind of stuck out to me that I was reading up on a little bit are how, like, these were being made during the Depression and did not shy away from being like, oh yeah, these are all children who are living in poverty. Like, they're all kind of dressed in kind of raggedy clothes, or some of them are dressed in kind of, there's a raggediness to some of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're, running around empty lots and stuff, as kids do in the Depression. And then also that this is like one of the only like positive depictions of like racial harmony in 1930s film.
That's right. Yeah.
And that it's like a more diverse set of kids than a lot of just other movie casts tended to be during this time period.
And it had been that way since the early 20s. I know that, like, that had been like a kind of controversial element of it for a long time, and it's very respectable.
It helps these age better too. I think that it's. Like, I think a lot of 1930s entertainment sometimes is like, ooh, I don't know. Less than I kind of worried it would be. I think it was. Yeah. It tended to be worse in the 20s, but there's a lot that we haven't seen also. So I don't want to make broad sweeping statements.
Yeah, I know that there are a handful of our gang shorts that, like, on the Blu-rays and such come with full warning before them that this one has some kind of thing or whatever. But it's like, they have over 150, if not like a couple hundred shorts, and it's like only a small handful of them that are like that. I mean, I think that also is like a really good point in the favor of this for something that can be shown to audiences today and kids today is it's just like it would be uncomfortable to show this to a kid now, to have to explain all of the, all if there were racism in it,
Yeah.
So yeah, evergreen.
Yeah. Our gang, good.
Official 1 week 1 year
Yeah.
position. And now that we've knocked out those two little one reelers, let's get to our feature presentation.
And now we're pleased to bring you our feature presentation.
We could start with a comedy film that also features a gang of children.
Right, yeah. I assume you're talking about You Can't Take It With You.
Yes, the Frank Capra film, You Can't Take It With You.
This is not my favorite Capra. I
No.
think it's like some of his worst tendencies, maybe.
It's funny how it feels very Capra-esque in the sort of obvious ways of it's about the working man. It's like feel good, and it has this really kind of like uplifting, life affirming kind of bent to it. But it also is like it definitely feels like lesser Capra compared to like his classics. This is not really one of his classics, and you can see why, because it's not as good.
Yeah, it's not terrible, but it's like
It's fine.
It works. I think it's got this like really strange political situation going on where it is I don't know, it's like it's like this kind of rugged individualist, like I don't like paying income tax, so I won't situation.
Right.
But then also, we should all get along, and the working man is better than the business man and all that. Like he definitely, in all of his movies, he's very America, but then he doesn't like the kind of end consequences of where America thinking goes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Frank Capra was fairly like conservative for the time, I guess. Maybe not for the time, but like yeah, I can definitely see maybe some libertarian worldview sneaking into this one.
Yeah.
Because it's funny, because it's like it starts out and it's like, don't you hate your dumb office job that no one likes to do? Like, wouldn't you rather just go live in a big house and like make the stuff that you want to make? And I'm like, yeah, this is great. And then it's like, also, don't you hate income tax? And I'm like, whoa, movie. Pump the brakes.
Yeah. It's definitely like putting together this sort of like bohemian collective of artists and weirdos that are like kind of a family, but also a handful of just people who just end up hanging out there for free. It does feel almost like a libertarian commune, like Rapture.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it's maybe less of a kind of a meritocracy than Rapture is.
I'm just saying things.
If we're gonna compare the two, yeah, I also feel like there's that kind of stuff like seeded in this movie, but overall it does feel like it's mostly going for just kind of feel good comedy.
Yes.
Everyone should just hug kind of stuff, which I can get behind.
Yeah. The kind of like patriarch, the kind of main axis of this movie is the grandpa. What's his name?
And his name in the film is Grandpa. Like, I think his character does have a name, but everyone refers to him as Grandpa.
Yeah, who's played by Lionel Barrymore, who usually plays bad guys. But
right?
In this, he plays like a very convincing, whimsical, quirky good guy.
Yeah, I feel like it's Lionel Barrymore is probably most famous for playing a shitty bank owner in It's a Wonderful Life, another Frank Capra movie. And so it's funny to see him in this playing like the opposite of that character.
Yeah. a guy who absolutely detests shitty bank owners.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, just come on, just hang out. Like, we're all friends. And then, but it also, I feel like the movie is aware that, like, that having that mindset and living that way, like, requires a certain degree of, like, wealth. And also then the tax man will come knocking and be like, hey, you haven't paid income tax in 10 years. We're going to need that from you.
And I mean, with a movie that we'll be talking about later, it's another one where immense privilege allows you to be immensely quirky and just be unbridled in your in your insanity.
Yeah.
This movie also has our first appearance we've seen of James Stewart, little baby face James Stewart.
Yeah, I guess right for the show. This isn't the earliest movie of his that I've seen, I don't think, but it is. I think it's the first one that we're talking about on the show.
Yeah, and he's very young here. I think if I remember correctly, he's in his like early 20s.
Yeah, James Stewart, Gangly King is my Letterboxd review of this movie.
Gangly King, and he's already kind of. I mean, I guess it's just his voice and his mannerisms, but he's already like pretty full James Stewart mode in this movie.
Yeah. No, like he had that going right off the bat. I feel like the Jimmy Stewart, I don't know, persona is definitely alive in this movie.
And so Jimmy Stewart is playing the son of this kind of real estate developer who is trying to buy up the entire neighborhood that Quirky Grandpa and his band of merry men live in. And then, but unbeknownst to anybody involved, he and the daughter of the family fall in love with each other. And then you got a sort of like Romeo and Juliet thing going on.
Yeah.
But then you also kind of have a like the birdcage thing going on where it's like you're like the weird people are having to pretend to be normals to appease the parents of the
wow, yeah, that's
the friend, the boyfriend.
Yeah, those two movies have a very similar premise. I hadn't thought of that. And I think they both kind of have a similar ending too, where like the like crusty old,
the conservative, really,
in
this movie and in the birdcage,
kind of learn to loosen up a little bit and appreciate humanity a little bit more, as opposed to money.
Take a deep breath and appreciate life.
Yeah, because Jimmy Stewart's character's parents they're upset that he's dating Jean Arthur's character, not because of any other reason that she is a stenographer and that they think that that's like below him. Like there's definitely a lot of class commentary going on in this movie,
right?
But it goes in a typical Frank Capra-y way where.
Yeah, in the 11th hour, the evil businessman goes, "Never mind, everybody be fun and have Merry Christmas to all."
Well, the power of music. They have a harmonica duet, and
that's right.
Sort of,
yeah,
it melts his icy heart.
Yeah, Grandpa hands him a harmonica, and then there's all these shots, there's all these parts in like boardrooms where the developer is like, making plans to seize control and take everyone's homes away. And then there are these like conspicuous shots of the harmonica to symbolize his lost innocence,
Another sort of very Frank Capra thing is that Grandpa gets arrested and he's got all these, back income taxes and fines and things, and then the whole community comes together and pools all their money together to pay his fines.
Yeah,
because everyone loves Grandpa.
Another connection with this and the last thing that we talked about is that there are just random fireworks going off at all points during this movie. Because one of there's like a dozen or so people in this mansion all doing
Yeah,
their own strange
all
thing.
these different kooky characters.
Yeah, and one of the kooky characters, or two of the kooky characters, are working on fireworks in the basement, which leads to a confrontation with the police. But then also just explosions in the background of a bunch of different shots.
But I don't know if I have a lot to say about this movie other than it has a lot of these like very kind of typical Frank Capra like story beats in it, but it doesn't really come together the way that I think a lot of his more well-known movies do.
Yeah, but this did win Best Picture, I believe.
True, it did. It did win the Oscar for 1938, which is I had heard of it before for that reason, but I had never taken the time to watch it.
Yeah.
And now I'm like,
You
okay.
Can't Take It With You is kind of a strange title, and it refers to money after you die. You can't take it with you. So why quest after it so much and just have fun instead?
Yeah, which I like that message of like, come on, do something fun.
Make fireworks in your basement.
Yeah, what's worse gonna happen? I guess I feel like this movie also does present the like, what's the worst gonna happen? Like, I don't know, you could get arrested, your house could burn down. Like, those are possibilities.
But we've got privilege. Shall we move on to
another comedy where people get arrested?
Another comedy where rich people get thrown in jail and act insane with impunity.
Yeah.
It's Bringing Up Baby.
Another movie that I had heard of but wasn't really familiar with.
Yeah, I didn't know that baby didn't refer to a baby.
Right. The Howard Hawks directed this, which I think I've seen some other Howard Hawks stuff. This is a pretty kind of similar to It Can't Take You With You. It's pretty like classical Howard Hawks, like screwball comedy. A lot of fast talking.
There's a lot of fast talking in this
The
movie.
premise of this movie is insane. I feel like I did not really know what the premise of this movie was going into it, and then about halfway through, once it's kind of clear what the premise of this movie is, I was like, wait, this is insane. This can't be what this movie's about.
I mean, really, this movie is just like extreme chaos. It is like it's less plot and more just like what can happen next that will cause the most chaos in everyone's life.
Yes, but it holds together very well, I think, compared to some other movies with similar zaniness to them. This one is very well written, just in terms of like having things that will like show up in the beginning, they'll come back at the end, and just it's a well built screenplay. This movie,
I guess that's true. It is like as far as it's like a tight script.
Yeah,
as far as like everything kind of being relevant and tying into itself
while still being pretty wacky.
It's expansive in a lot of ways too.
Yeah.
I guess the premise of this movie is that Cary Grant plays a zoologist or a paleontologist or something like that.
Yeah, he's working on some dinosaur bones.
He's been like, he's very buttoned up and kind of tight, and
he's got glasses. He's always worried about stuff.
And the thing that he's most worried about, even though his wedding is tomorrow, is securing a $1 million grant from a rich benefactor to the museum that he works at, and helping and trying to finish his dinosaur skeleton that he's been working on for 4 years.
Yeah.
And so to that end, his wife, who says, or his fiance, who says, don't worry about our wedding. Like, our wedding is purely about your career. It has nothing to do with anything domestic. And at her urging, he goes golfing with the lawyer of the rich benefactor. And so the story kind of just launches off from that golf course when he runs into Katharine Hepburn playing a character named Susan, who is just chaos incarnate as a person. She is just like taking other people's golf balls and playing with them. She hops into his car and doesn't realize that it's his and just starts driving away. But while she's driving away, she smashes into a tree and other cars and doesn't have a care in the world. And yeah, this is, in my mind, the first appearance of the manic pixie dream girl, with the emphasis on manic.
I don't think that you're alone in that, because I was reading up on this movie and it has been cited elsewhere as, like, if not the first example, like a very early example of that trope, kind of. Like, I think the manic aspect has kind of got lost more recent, when that kind of like character archetype shows up. I feel like the manic is usually downplayed. Whereas in this, it is like manic, and then like in tiny letters, Pixie Dream Girl. Like that stuff. It's mostly that she's manic. Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn are both, especially Cary Grant though, are both so good at just like the physicality, like physical comedy. Like Cary Grant does so much of just like slipping on banana peels and like getting flustered and nervous and angry and running around and yelling at people, and you can feel his like his anxiety just building and building through every single scene. He starts off the movie pretty anxious, and then it gets progressively worse over the course of the movie.
And I think you experienced that too. This movie is like towing a very strange line of being a comedy movie, but you are so stressed the entire time.
Well, because it's that thing of like, he has to get home because he has a wedding tomorrow, and he also has all these like important business things he has to do. And Katharine Hepburn just does not give a shit whatsoever and keeps pulling him further and further, and like steals a car and like drives off with him in it. And he's like, what are we doing? It's like, I just took this guy's car. And he's like, no, I need to go home.
Oh, and we haven't mentioned the titular baby,
right.
Who is maybe, the most kind of on paper insane, wild thing that she brings into his life, which is a leopard. It is a leopard named Baby, who is a kind of constant thorn in their side because he keeps doing leopard things.
Well, because this movie already had this setup of like a good screwball comedy of like these two mismatched people who like meet by happenstance, and there's all this chaos that results from that. But it's like they clearly have so much like chemistry. Like the scene at the beginning when you're introduced to Cary Grant and his fiance is like the most obvious, immediate, like, oh, this marriage is not going to happen. Like 1,000%. This is the most doomed marriage in history. And so it already has this like pretty compelling, solid comedy setup. And then it's like, also there's a leopard.
And you'd think it'd be like too much of an extra step, but somehow it works.
It's sort of a leopard on a hat.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does it works. It heightens all these other plot threads so much just by like, also there's a leopard there.
Right, and you don't like, sometimes they've put the leopard away and so they can focus on other things. I was kind of imagining when I, heard what this movie was actually about, a leopard. I kind of imagined that it would be very leopard focused, but really it's just focused on chaos, and a leopard is one of the zanier things that occasionally pops up. But they do take time to like, the leopard's in a cage for now, let's have some other flavors of chaos.
It's a real leopard in this movie, which is both on set with the actors sometimes, but a lot of the time is sort of very cleverly like composited in or done through like rear projection or like split screen.
Yeah. There are some leopard scenes where they use a double exposure. You can like see some slight translucencies in them. But it's very well done, only when you kind of just see in the corners,
Yeah. I think the one of the only times it's really noticeable is there's a bit where Katharine Hepburn is holding a leash for the leopard, and you can see that the leash that she's holding does not line up with the leash that's attached to the leopard. But it's like, otherwise it's pretty seamless. And there's also just scenes in this where I'm like, that's a leopard. Like this I'm like afraid for the actors.
Yeah, it adds to the tension a lot that they're just like casually sitting there while a wild animal is behind them.
Yeah. So
And there are two leopards in here. Baby is a very friendly looking leopard, and then there's another one who is a very angry, mean looking leopard.
Yeah. There's also a scene where I believe it's Baby the leopard gets into a fight with George the dog, who's Katharine Hepburn's character's dog, who's played by Skippy, who was the dog in the Thin Man movies. Great dog acting from Skippy.
We keep running into Skippy.
Yeah. There's a scene where Baby and George get into a fight, and it's like, that's just a leopard and a dog fighting. And I'm like, this is like, I feel the tension of that just because it's like, that's just a dog and a leopard that they like put in a room together. And it's scary.
Yeah, they seed that thing earlier in the movie too, when she receives Baby in the mail, and there's a letter that comes with him, and the letter says Baby loves dogs, and then she says, do they mean she like in a friendly way or in an eating way?
Yeah, it's definitely kind of like, I feel like it probably was not like a safe set for either of those animals to be on, but I guess it's funny.
Yeah.
I guess it was worth it.
I think they're okay. Maybe they were just playing.
I mean,
it kind of looked like they were playing.
Skippy went on to be in more Thin Man movies after this, so clearly Skippy was okay. There's a bit in this movie that I enjoy in pretty much any movie when Cary Grant decides to take a shower, and Katharine Hepburn steals his clothes, and so he has to wear like a very like frilly robe for a couple of scenes. It's the only thing that he has that is like available. And I just find that bit always very funny when someone is like forced to wear silly clothing or like something incongruous. Like, it's funny in Pulp Fiction when they have to wear like goofy t-shirts. It's funny in any movie when someone is like, because I feel like that's just a thing in life where it's like you've been over at someone's house or you're like at a theme park or something, and you're like, my shirt is ruined. I have to buy a goofy shirt that I don't like, that I don't want to wear, but that's all that's here.
And he doesn't like it, but he's more stressed about other things,
right?
Mainly.
Yeah.
But then he's confronted about his frilly robe that he's wearing.
Yeah.
And he shouts, "Maybe I've just gone gay all of a sudden,"
whilst jumping in the air.
Yeah. Yes. and looking a little fruity while he does it.
As far as I can tell, that's, at least for the things that we've watched for the show, the first time I think that gay has been used in this context of not just like lighthearted and happy.
Yeah.
I don't know, but even that is the sort of like, I don't know how much that was in common usage at the time. I think it was by the 1930s.
From Wikipedia, which, is a source.
Suspect source, yeah.
It's saying that it was known, but not super common, super known to the general public until the late 60s. But, it's, he was in Hollywood.
Right.
And also,
people in Hollywood know.
I think and also there were kind of like rumors at the time that like Cary Grant might have been gay or bi.
Oh yeah.
So at least he like, had close relationships with men.
Was the thing like in like biographies, and it's like, oh man, like Cary Grant and his very close male friend that he lives with and like goes to the pool with every day. They're such good friends. So and it was an ad lib too. So I think he probably knew what he was doing. Yeah. At a certain point, the chaos reaches a head, and every character is arrested and thrown in jail. And Katharine Hepburn kind of tries to get out of it by kind of playing a femme fatale kind of character, and pretending that she's like a a smooth criminal.
Mm-hmm.
And she gives a couple of people aliases, and they are Mickey the Mouse and Donald the Duck. Which it's kind of fun just because that it's like a contemporary reference to Disney cartoons, despite this being an RKO picture. What if they had to pay Disney for the rights? Maybe Disney wasn't doing that yet.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah, it's parody, so it's okay. But yeah, fun movie. I think Cary Grant had popped up in another movie before that we watched. I think he was in Merrily We Go to Hell for like one scene. This is first like lead that we've seen him do, and same with Katharine Hepburn. 3 big classical Hollywood actors popping up this episode.
Oh yeah.
And all I think in fairly kind of typical roles for them. I think the good kind of showcases for each of their kind of most well-known types, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Although I think that Katharine Hepburn kind of didn't really do many like screwball comedies after this. I think like because this movie did pretty poorly at the box office, she ended up kind of finding other types of roles afterwards.
Yeah, I know that there's at least a few other like big comedies that she did though. So I'm like Philadelphia Story I've seen, which is her with Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart. I think that's like 40 or 41. We'll get to it. And yeah, very good example of like the Howard Hawks thing of like a lot of overlapping dialogue, a lot of like fast talking stuff.
Yeah. Another thing we'll have to prepare for is
30s
so after
30s slang getting thrown at the screen with abandon.
Yeah. So I watched this movie twice. And both times that I watched it, it was a little hard to take in what I just watched because I was so exhausted by the end of it. I felt like both times I felt like I needed to just take a breath afterward, you know? And I was talking to Jack Vernick of our Irma Vep episode about it, and he says that the 1940 Howard Hawks movie, His Girl Friday, is about 3 times as dense and fast talking. It is. He was saying that the first time he watched it, he hated it because of just like how overwhelming it was. So I'm interested to see how that goes. Because I guess what I'm saying is that Howard Hawks starts to go even further with this.
I'm excited.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Another movie that is about people talking very quickly. Or it's not about that, but it has some of the fastest line deliveries I've ever seen in any movie. Is The Adventures of Robin Hood, directed by Michael Curtiz and William Keighley.
Mm-hmm.
Another Curtiz picture. This is sort of like a spiritual sequel, I guess, to Captain Blood. It's like a lot of the same cast. Similar
got a lot
kind
of blood energy.
Swashbuckling adventure picture. But in Technicolor this time.
Yes. And this is beautiful Technicolor. This is
like the most Technicolor-y movie that ever Technicolored. It is like so bright and vivid and colorful.
Yeah, it's kind of hyper real. I mean, I think this is a fun movie in a lot of ways, but like it had me thinking about the color itself a lot, right? Especially in comparison to A Star Is Born, which had this kind of like muddy proto Technicolor, proto 3-strip kind of situation that didn't quite work all the time. And this is like, it's not real, but it's definitely like realistic colors. It's extremely saturated, which I think is really cool and stylish, honestly.
Yeah. It looks like Snow White, like the cartoon. Like it's like approaching levels of cartoonishness just by how bright the colors are.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the colors are brighter than in Snow White.
Probably,
it is an extremely bright movie.
And you can tell that it's designed to look that like every costume is like bright green, bright red, bright yellow. Like it's every single color is. There are no like subtle colors in the costumes or the sets or anything. Like everything is clearly designed to be as bright as possible.
Yeah, and like, I mean, which, honestly, go off, right? Like, I guess, it's kind of funny because people thought of color as a gimmick at the time. And when I see a 3D movie that's just constantly going, whoa, whoa, in your
Right.
face all the time, I say, that's corny. Why are you doing that? But for this movie that was a gimmick that was in color and it's just the most color, so on board. Like,
it's
do
cool.
it.
Because it's not really distracting. It's just like, whoa,
No,
this movie's
yeah.
colorful.
Yeah, a lot of like sparkly clothes and saturated cloths. And something that I noticed, which might have to do with the 3-strip process and probably got hammered out a little bit as they continued to work on Technicolor, is the most saturated colors in this movie are reds, greens, and blues.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, it is basically, I think they're kind of needing to just dial those down a little bit to get more realistic colors in the mixing of those three.
Mm-hmm.
But the colors that just hit the red, green, and blue Technicolor strips directly are just like red, green, blue.
Well, and it also works great because then it's like the Robin Hood typically wearing lots of green.
Yep, in the forest, which is made of green,
right?
And there's blue skies.
And then like castle, a lot of like red tapestries and stuff, right? Like the prince and Guy of Gisborne are wearing a lot of red because they're bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like it this movie even feels kind of like color coded in that thing too, where it's like Robin Hood is from the forest, he wears green. Like in the castle, things are red. Like it's very But I like that about it. And it's like if you're gonna have a movie that's in color, like have some colors in there.
Yeah. I think the only downside to the hyper saturation was a scene when they were showing some red wine that looked like radioactive.
Yeah, and it makes everyone look like they're in a Ren fair, but in a good way.
Yes, yeah. This is definitely a movie that is it's a bunch of people having a lot of fun dressing up in costumes and running around in the forest and on these giant sets. It's a fun time.
Yeah. The word I kept thinking of watching this movie is jaunty.
Yeah.
It's like it's very light, it's very quick on its feet, and it never really takes itself that seriously. Like even when things are getting serious, it's like they're not getting that serious. Like oh no, like Robin Hood got like thrown in the dungeon or whatever, and it's like he's fine. Like it's the stakes never get so high as that you're like actually worried about the outcome, I feel like.
Yeah, and it's just like the way that he plays stuff too, like as Robin Hood. Like in Captain Blood, he's extremely he's smarmy in this movie, and I think this might just be like Errol Flynn's
I think that's just Errol Flynn's way, yeah.
But at least like compared to Captain Blood, it's dialed back a little bit. I think it's instead of just I'm sitting here being smug in front of everyone, it is like, yes, I'm the best archer, and I'm a little nimble Peter Pan type on my feet, and I'm gonna joke around while I'm besting you in single combat.
Right. I mean, Robin Hood's kind of whole thing is that he's kind of an asshole, right? Like he's playing tricks on people, he's stealing stuff, he's being a little stinker.
I'm glad you can say that from knowledge, because as I started watching this, I realized that most of my Robin Hood knowledge comes from the Disney movie.
Well, I mean, I think even like the Disney movie, I feel like is pulling a lot from this movie.
For sure, yeah.
I would say that this movie is probably like maybe the most iconic version of Robin Hood in popular culture. This is like the quintessential image of Robin Hood in like with the green hat and a bow and arrow and a mustache, telling jokes, doing sword fights, like falling off logs into rivers. I think probably the Disney movie is maybe a close second or like tied with this in terms of just like the thing that people think of when they think of Robin Hood. Mm-hmm. Or the Kevin Costner movie. But I feel like even that is like a little bit more, it feels a little bit more like that's like a take on Robin Hood as opposed to like, oh no, that's just what Robin Hood is.
I mean, I would hazard to say that more people who are alive right now have seen the Disney version than have seen this version.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And so my guess would be that when most people think of Robin Hood, they think of the fox, but a person.
Right, but it's like that's basically what this movie is, right?
Yeah.
That is funny though. Yeah. Also, Errol Flynn, unlike some other Robin Hoods, can do an English accent.
Are you putting anyone on blast right now? I haven't seen
Kevin Costner.
I haven't seen the Kevin Costner movie.
Well, that's in Men in Tights. There's that joke where Carrie-O
I see.
says that he can do an English accent because he's English.
Ah.
This movie also takes a lot of inspiration, and some of the cast, from the 1922 Douglas Fairbanks Robin Hood, which we did not watch for the show, but I want to go back and watch now.
Yeah, wow. There's like a good amount of Fairbanks energy in his performance, and that checks out, you know.
He's not quite as like acrobatic as Fairbanks is, but he's leaning into a lot of the same kind of tendencies, I think. But even like
especially the kind of especially the kind of sitting there with his arms at his side and going ha 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 ha.
Yeah, a lot of hearty laughter.
Yeah,
like the sets in this movie are like, some of them are like direct copies. I don't think they use the same sets, but it's like they're clearly designed in the same way as the Douglas Fairbanks one. I know it does all the Robin Hood stuff that I feel like you'd expect from a Robin Hood movie. They establish the king is away, and so they want to raise taxes on everybody, and Robin Hood is like, no, I'm gonna go live in the woods and like let people live without undue taxation. There's a lot of stuff in this movie with like taxes and
like 1200s politics.
Yeah, like Normans versus Saxons, which was sort of like, you know, different like social groups in England in the medieval times, which is like mostly breaks down to just like a class thing of like Normans, high class, Saxons, lower class, like working class. It is funny how like lighthearted this movie is when it's like they kind of brush over people are getting like their hands chopped off or like getting put to death because like they can't pay their taxes.
Right.
Yeah, and then Robin Hood becomes Robin Hood is declared an outlaw, as certain other Prince Johns say in other Robin Hood movies.
Robin Hood scholar.
I gotta put a little clip of Oscar Isaac yelling in there for the YouTube show.
Typically, by the way, the YouTube version is the best way to listen to our podcast, because we've got little bonus things on here. But for the podcast people, we have little musical jokes that would get us struck on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. We try to give all audience members something special. But there's the kind of classic, I think very like classic Robin Hood scene of him walking in with the deer on his shoulders, where like they try to kill a guy for hunting a deer, and Robin Hood is like, no. That's mean. I'm gonna bring a deer to the castle and be smug about it. and they call Robin Hood a bold rascal and a saucy fellow.
We got little rascals grow up to be bold rascals.
Yeah,
and
saucy fellows. So the big sort of addition to the cast, right? This is sort of the three like lead principal actors from Captain Blood: Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland, and Basil Rathbone, as sort of almost the same characters from Captain Blood, like
right,
like smug swashbuckler, woman, and villain.
Right. Why come only one girl?
Well, I think Maid Marian and also Olivia de Havilland's character in Captain Blood are these sort of like, they come from a sort of like wealthy families. They're involved in no good, and she sort of has a similar arc in both, where she sort of joins the outlaws a bit. But the big addition here is we get Claude Rains as Prince John, doing a very sort of like preening royal guy who's like, oh dear, oh bring me a goblet. Whereas Basil Rathbone is sort of the meaner, harder edged villain. Although he doesn't play the Sheriff of Nottingham. I always thought that he did in this movie. He plays Guy of Gisborne, And then the Sheriff of Nottingham is a different character who's sort of like just very lazy. He's sort of the lazy villain.
You definitely are more familiar with this lore than me.
Robin Hood lore?
Yeah, which is on brand for you.
Oh yeah, I like Robin Hood. Robin Hood's fun. But I feel like every version of Robin Hood has the same like couple of beats, right? It's like the thing with the deer. There's like the bow staff fight on the log with Little John where he gets knocked off.
Which in this movie is just such a none shall pass moment, you know?
Yeah.
It's like,
well, I mean, where do you think they got that from, you know?
Yeah, exactly. He just literally sits on that log to challenge anybody who comes by. It's kind of an amazing thing.
That's his deal. That's what people did in medieval times.
Right. You didn't have anything better to do.
There's the whole archery contest in which Robin Hood has to disguise himself by wearing a different hat. And it's like, oh, don't worry, no one will recognize me. I'll wear a different hat.
Robin Hood's the green guy. That guy's not green.
Yeah, that guy's wearing like brown earth tones. Like, that can't be him. Look at his hat.
This is a Technicolor movie.
Yeah.
That scene also is probably the most famous shot from this movie. The most famous thing from this movie is just the shot of the arrow being split.
Yeah.
In that archery contest. And yes, it's very cool.
Yeah. And yeah, like Robin Hood kidnaps like Guy of Gisborne and Maid Marian and brings them out to his hideout in Sherwood Forest to show off, basically. He's like, hey, we kidnapped you. Why don't you come to the woods and party with us? Which I know you I feel like you have less patience for Errol Flynn's like smarminess than I do.
I was fine with it in this movie.
I think the point in this movie that I was the most like, oh god, come on with this dude, is in that scene when he like takes Maid Marian to show her how he's like feeding all of the people that were like driven out of Nottingham or whatever. And he's going around, it's like, I just care so much, you know? And it's like, come on. He's like trying so hard to come across like, I also just, I just really care about my community, I guess, like whatever. And Maid Marian is like, oh, you're so good. In addition to being such a smarmy,
a heartthrob, a
there you
smarmy
go.
Heartthrob,
smarmy heartthrob, classic Robin Hood type. But yeah, so then they arrest Robin Hood at the archery contest. And they're like listing off all his crimes. And another point where I was like, this guy's leaning into it a little too much is when they're listing all of his crimes. And he's like, oh, I think you forgot a crime. You forgot that, I guess, living my country is a crime now, too, under Prince John, I guess. And then he breaks out and there's a big assault on the castle. And sword fights and stunts happen. And it's very fun.
Fun fights.
And then the king comes back. And he's disguised, and he's trying to get everyone to like talk shit about him while he's disguised. He's like, "Hey, what do you think about that king, huh?" And everyone's like, I don't know, I'm not so sure about him. Or everyone's like, "Oh yeah, king, he's great, I guess." And then Robin Hood is one of the few people who's like, "King's pretty good, but I have some thoughts on the king." And the king is like, "Oh, he's honest. He speaks his mind. He's respectable.
He's a scoundrel, but you gotta love him."
Yeah. There's some cool stunts in this. There's like climbing up a rope on like a drawbridge. It's really cool. There's a kind of classic Michael Curtiz thing, I guess. Having watched a couple of Michael Curtiz movies now, I guess that's one of his like trademarks is like silhouettes and like shadows projected on walls, which is cool. There's the big sword fight between Robin Hood and Guy of Gisborne that is I think a very cool, fun sort of fight that is referenced very directly in the movie The Rocketeer when the sort of Errol Flynn-esque character is shooting a movie. And it's like the set looks the same. It's like even the dialogue, I think, is like almost the same.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've watched The Rocketeer, but I felt like I knew that castle set because I've seen The Rocketeer.
Right, with
like something felt familiar
like
about it to me from another movie.
The spiral staircase with no handrail. But
Is that mandatory in spiral staircases?
I don't know. It's just like you could easily fall off that thing, and people do. But
It's olden times. People
it
died
is
all
olden
the
times.
time.
People did die all the time. Castles always need a good spiral staircase because it's hard to sword fight on them. Because if you're on the top of the stairs, you can sword fight more easily than if you're at the bottom of the stairs. It's a whole castle thing that I learned.
Yeah, this is very, very much castle trivia from I don't know if this is literally the case, but the kid who owned that Playmobil set, you know.
Yeah, or had the cross section book, the castle cross section book.
Yeah, the DK book, yeah.
The best. Shout out to the DK castle cross section book.
Honestly, any I go nuts for a cross section.
Yeah.
Always have, always will.
Una O'Connor is in this. Bringing her trademark.
That is her. Oh, that's right.
Her trademark screechiness. She's a lot less abrasive than she is in Bride of Frankenstein. Or probably Invisible Man also, but sort of a fun recurring. Just I don't know. It's fun to see actors recurring, I guess.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out because Michael Curtiz is credited along with William Keighley as director. And the impression I got, I couldn't find a lot of information about this, but it seems like William Keighley was initially the director and then got replaced either right before or like during production by Michael Curtiz, which is strange because it seems like this is such a like Curtiz production where it's like the cast that he knows. It's like a similar kind of movie that he's done before.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, what the story is there, and I couldn't really find a lot of good information on it.
We'll have to get the Blu-ray.
Yeah. Yeah, fun, cool Robin Hood movie. This is probably like the big 1938 movie, I feel like.
Yeah, this or Bringing Up Baby, I would say.
Yeah, definitely bodes well for the future of color in movies. We're gonna be seeing a lot more of that soon.
Yeah, and like a cartoony color reality, right? Kind of something that I think The Wizard of Oz leans into as well.
Yeah, something that I think I'm glad that movies have started to really embrace shooting on color film because I think it brings something to talkies that are kind of it brings a certain visual interest to talkies that I think a lot of them have been lacking since the transition to sound.
What can you say more about that? Like, how do you mean that?
I feel like once movies started having sound in them, they lost a lot of their visual style. I feel like they started to be a lot more kind of like, all right, we're on a set, it's people talking, like, and they became a lot more kind of like stagey.
Right. They lost like experimentation. They lost any like a kind of sense of visual experimentation. I don't know. I think that like in the transition to talkies, to me, I expected the cinematography to get like way more boring, and it only got like a little more boring, you know?
It's definitely coming out of it, and like movies are back to looking interesting, but the first like 1929, 1930, I feel like a lot of those.
Oh yeah.
A lot of those movies did not look great or were not interesting to watch. But I thought this was.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I feel like colors I would imagine that the purpose of going from the complete fabrication of reality that black and white is to color is like a sort of gesture toward verisimilitude, right? But like these early colors are undeniably fake in a way that feels stylistic and cool,
Yeah.
But it's like kind of a weird thing to like make this move toward reality, but then like pivot toward fantasy again.
I mean, I don't know. I think that I feel like a thought that I keep having while watching any movie is like naturalism is kind of overrated.
100%.
Or at least like it definitely has its place for sure. Like I don't have anything against naturalism, but I think there's so much emphasis put on making things like naturalistic and realistic, and it's like you're making a movie. Like I feel like there's a little more wiggle room than a lot of people tend to give themselves. And so I like when things get a little surreal. I like when things are a little bit heightened.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because I've been watching a lot of David Lynch lately, but yeah, I feel like that's...
I just watched Wild Things a couple days ago, which feels like a Twin Peaks movie.
I guess it does have a bit of... It doesn't really have like the surrealism of David Lynch, but it has that kind of like goofiness, I guess.
Especially of Twin Peaks. It's like it feels like the insane plots and
like insane like hyper like soap opera things where it's like everything is the most dramatic thing. Yeah. I
liked Wild Things a lot. I know this is not a
fun movie.
This is not a 1998 podcast, but I thought it was an incredibly fun movie.
Do you have any other thoughts on The Adventures of Robin Hood?
None.
All right. Well, we watched another movie about medieval times.
Yes, yeah. Covering a pretty similar like time period.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like within 100 years of each other.
Right.
Or maybe 50. That is Alexander Nevsky by Sergei Eisenstein. Haven't seen him in a while.
Yeah. I believe, as far as I can tell, his first proper talkie that was released anyway. I think he'd like shot some other stuff before this or whatever. But in terms of like
it was
feature length talking films, this is like his first one of those.
It was the first movie, like feature film that he'd made in 10 years.
Yeah. He co-directed it with Dmitry Vasilyev, who I'm not familiar with, but he has co-directing credit on this. And this movie is entirely based on a single battle from the 13th century in Russia. And the whole movie is about Germany invading Russia, which in 1938 was very pointed. And was not accidental whatsoever. This is like kind of a propaganda movie, I think. I don't think it is. It's a propaganda movie.
It's propaganda in that it's using historical figures to comment on current day political issues. But I think you'd kind of be doing that regardless if you made a historical movie, you know?
But it also is like... A thing that really stuck out to me about this movie is like there's never really any like moment of doubt or sort of like self-reflection or even like criticism of our like heroic characters, like Alexander Nevsky, who is a heroic prince who like rallies the troops and fends off the terrible German invaders, is like portrayed as like he is always correct, he is always morally certain, like he never has doubts about his role in any of this. He's just like, nope, he's here to do a good thing for the people.
Yeah, I found this movie quite simplistic.
Yeah.
I guess it is a propaganda movie, but like, you know, Man with a Movie Camera is a propaganda movie, and so is, I mean, maybe a better example is Battleship Potemkin. And I think those are both much more interesting movies than this one.
Well, so Man with a Movie Camera is propaganda in that it's like, look at all this cool shit we can do with cameras in Russia.
Well, it's also like, look at how cool Russia is, you know? And it also like has an anti-Nazi scene as well.
True. I mean, I can get behind that. And then Battleship Potemkin, I feel like just has a little... I don't know, I feel like it just has a little bit more kind of narrative complexity to it than this.
Yeah. I think something that's interesting that's shared between those two movies is that neither of them really have a main character. Honestly, Battleship Potemkin even less so. But like, you know, I think part of the kind of Soviet sort of thing that it's trying to do is this sort of like collective thing. It's like everyone's working together to fight this battle.
Yeah.
And there's like, yes, it's about the kind of cool and good leader Alexander Nevsky, but he kind of, you know, he isn't in a lot of scenes. He is a bit of a backseat in this movie.
Right. There's a bit of an ensemble in the characters of this. There's sort of a medieval challenger situation going on. To keep things topical and current. I think makes sense for Eisenstein's first talkie. I think this movie looks great and doesn't sound particularly great. It doesn't really use sound in interesting ways. Hardly
the sound
ever.
design, I think, is probably pretty bad.
It's pretty lacking. There's a lot of scenes that there's things happening. There's just no sound, really. There's like a little bit of score here and there, maybe. But like, scenes of dialogue aren't really that, they're not like interesting dialogue scenes the way that I feel like that the next movie we'll talk about is, or the way I think like Bringing Up Baby is, where it's like, this is like good dialogue. This is just people kind of like stating things a lot of the time.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of like Terje Vegan in terms of just these like, mythic historical figures who are just kind of saying vague things. I don't like this movie.
I like things about this movie. I think this movie is like really, I think it is really well directed in its, when it is more or less a silent movie. Like, I think you can tell where Eisenstein's like interests were making this, because I think when there's like long stretches without dialogue, I think those are the best parts of the movie. Like, I mean, the big battle scene is the best part because it's just a big battle scene.
I found myself so bored during that battle scene. It's an hour long. It's like an hour long, and
it is a bit long. It's true,
and it is like, I it's big in scale, but to me, I just never felt like it. I never felt like I cared about what was happening. It didn't. I think it didn't very effectively do this kind of. I think with a lot, it had me thinking about big battle scenes and how the way to make them work is to kind of be zooming in and out between like linking small character based things with the larger battle, because a large battle is just a bunch of swords hitting each other.
Yeah.
And this was where I was really getting annoyed with the sound design, where it's just a straight hour of this like very
wind chimes,
very like, yeah, it's very, like this very like dinky clicking together of hundreds of swords for like an hour, and it does not feel impactful,
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. It's like, I feel like there's definitely like some big wide shots that are just filled with extras that are like, wow, look at the size of this battle. And then there's some like kind of medium or close-up shots where you can really tell how like bad the fight choreography is, where like they're not even really hitting each other with the swords. Like, they're just kind of waving them around. They're just kind of bonking each other a little bit. And there's like a couple times where they use handheld camera shots to really kind of like sell the chaos. And I was like, could have used more of those, but
yeah.
I like things about this movie more than I like this movie itself, I guess.
Well, what did you like about the battle scene?
I like the lead up to it. I like the kind of like seeing the troops amassing on the ice. It feels very Battle of Hoth, which I think might have even been a direct inspiration on a little bit of like seeing like kind of coming out of the horizon, like the enemy armies approaching.
That was a good shot. Yeah.
I like how there are like little character beats interspersed throughout it. I like a lot of the design of particularly the sort of Teutonic like German knights that are in these like absurd not over design, but these very elaborate costumes that are like,
they're all very like Crusades kind of looking things.
I don't know how like historically accurate they are, but like all of their helmets are like super crazy looking and elaborate. They're kind of like rank and file soldiers all have these helmets with like a cross in them, like, which I think is pretty much based on a real kind of Crusader knight design, but I think it might be a little exaggerated here. But then there's the kind of like boss knights that have these like crazy like animal carving helmets and things.
They're the ones with the what is it, the revenge system from Shadow of Mordor,
Right, yes, exactly. Much like how the kind of heroic characters are kind of presented as just like, they are heroic, they are correct, they are right. the villains in this are like the most villainous, like awful, inhuman. Like they throw toddlers into fire, which I mean, looking at Russia, looking at Germany, it's like, I guess it hadn't really happened. Well, there was some stuff in World War I that was bad, but like it does feel kind of spookily prophetic at certain points where like the villains are like burn everything, and it's like
I mean, the Nazis were already doing bad stuff
Also
before
true.
they officially declared war. As far as being a propaganda movie, this kind of historically, like, I don't know, historically infused propaganda movie or propaganda infused history movie, you know? It's basically like Russia's good and cool,
Mhm.
and Germany is religious and evil.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of like Christian iconography with the villains, a lot of crosses. There's like the villainous bishop whose hat has like barely disguised swastikas on it.
Yeah.
They like add in like an extra little thing onto it, but it's like you can tell that they just like drew an extra part over it almost. I don't know, there's some good kind of John Ford framing with the horizon at the bottom. I just feel like a lot of the kind of like compositions of
Yeah.
around the battle are really, I mean, throughout the whole movie, look really nice.
I really like the opening shots of the movie that are showing like the kind of remains of a battlefield with skulls and that kind of thing, lying around. Those shots were very cool,
but also
and I was like,
combined with like pastoral like beauty too.
Yeah, it was really neat, and you know, I just have a really hard time with these historical epics, especially the kind of ones with big battles. Like I just like have a really hard time caring. But when this started and I was seeing those shots, I was like, okay, all right, let's get going here, and then it quickly got boring.
I think this movie held my interest more than I thought it might. I was definitely going here. I was like, oh, this like historical war movie or whatever. We'll see. Maybe it was just the fact that it's like technically very accomplished that I was like, it's cool.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like stuff happening in the foreground and the background in this movie that I thought was cool and interesting that I feel like we don't see that much of. I think this movie is at its best when it kind of lets the imagery speak for itself and is just sort of like presenting you with things and isn't really trying to, when it shows and doesn't tell, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a cool bit at the end of the battle where all the bad guys fall through the ice. I thought that kind of rules.
That was fun. Yeah. Having just watched Last Crusade, very similar.
Hey, there you go.
The ground cracking and the Nazis falling through.
Yeah. Nazis falling through the ground. Always fun. I do think it's kind of funny that it almost feels like the message of this movie is like fuck around and find out. Like this movie ends with just like, hey, you thought you could invade Russia? Nice try, buddy. Not today.
I mean, they're not wrong though.
Yeah.
Like historically speaking, they are correct.
Historically speaking, both before and immediately after this movie, they were proven very correct. Of like, do not invade Russia. It is a bad idea. Another thing that stuck out to me is there's a bit where someone yells, "Avenge us." I think it's like when the Teutonic Knights are like burning down the village. Which reminded me of the scene in Red Dawn when the guy's like, "Avenge me." And I looked into it, and that is an explicit reference to this movie in Red Dawn.
Oh, wow.
Because Red Dawn, a movie about Soviets invading the United States, also weirdly like similar in tone and structure and like theme to this movie, even though it's flipped and Russians are the bad guys in that. After the Soviets have occupied the sort of like picturesque American town in that movie, on the movie theater marquee, it says Alexander Nevsky. So, like, the Soviets are playing this movie in the movie theater. And then also there's a scene where someone's like, "Avenge me!" So it's like, clearly John Milius had seen this movie when he made that.
I thought the inclusion of the Mongols was interesting. Like, right in the beginning of the movie, they were kind of fresh off of fighting off the Mongol invasion of Russia, and then he kind of Alexander is kind of living his pastoral life in his fishing town, and some Mongols come up and everybody wants to fight them, and he's like, there's bigger fish to fry right now. Like, we gotta fight the Germans instead.
Yeah, it's like the Germans are amassing troops. Maybe we should worry about that before the Mongols. There's a bit where Alexander Nevsky says, "Get my princely attire ready," which might just be a weird translation because all the dialogue is in Russian. But I thought that line was funny.
Well, I mean, he does get his princely attire. He does come back and he looks a little more princely.
That he does. So yeah, I didn't love this movie, but I thought it was I thought it had some cool stuff in it, and also just like is interesting historically for like a Soviet movie that is like, hey, Germans, we don't like them. They're trying to start shit, and they should.
Basically, for the last decade, we've been seeing movies just nervous about the Germans.
What do you think about they just had a war, like not that long ago.
I mean, I think this kind of lines up more with the existence of the Nazis than anything else, but it was probably only a decade or so after the end of World War One, when movies were going like, the Germans are about to do it again. Yeah, like we got to be worried about this.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was like between like 1919 and 1929, which like that is like the Weimar era, when it was like Germany had its shit together a little bit. And then, yeah, starting around 1929, 1930 is like when it started to get real bad.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to is this our final picture of the episode?
It is. Doesn't it feel kind of weird? I know, like we're doing 5 instead of 6.
Yeah, another European film. This one is...
Pinkies up, everybody.
Yeah, this one is Port of Shadows by Marcel Carnet. Yeah. Which is, if you couldn't tell, a French film. And it is...
Wait, tell me the French title then.
Oh, Port of Shadows? I don't know it off the top of my head. What would port be? I'm just going to look it up. Duolingo hasn't taught me port or shadows yet. I mean, Duolingo doesn't really teach me anything, but it helps me practice.
Le Quai des Brumes.
Le Quai des Brumes. Yeah. The Dock of Mists is, I guess, a more direct translation of the French title. But anyway, this movie is very French, I thought.
Yes. It's starring Jean Gabin, who we saw in The Grand Illusion.
Yeah, he's back playing a soldier again. Playing almost the same character, it feels like. A sort of jaded soldier home from war. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is sort of a proto-noir movie. It's a crime picture about people kind of living on the edge of society.
Yeah.
In the ports of shadows. Those shadowy ports.
Yeah. This movie, it feels like oh god, I was thinking this earlier. It feels a lot like The Petrified Forest.
Yeah.
And with like a little bit of see, I was gonna write this down. It was like The Petrified Forest with the energy of another movie that we've seen, but I can't remember. But like there's something about it that feels a bit play-like. There's a lot of characters kind of sitting in rooms saying stuff. But I think the stuff they're saying is extremely compelling. Like I think that like a lot of the things that people just spout out, they're just this French ennui loaded like phrases like, I only paint.
Well, there's a painter that we get introduced to fairly early who just says the most like French depressing shit, and it's the best. I love it.
It's so good because it's all so evocative.
Yeah, I'd see crime in a rose, he says. And then when he talks about his paintings, he says, on my canvas I find only hate, jealousy, murder, a cemetery.
He says he paints what he sees, and to me a swimmer has already drowned.
the best. That's this whole movie is like that vibe.
Yeah, it's so moody. I love this movie. I think it's great. it's just got a lot of like fun stuff in it, cool vibes, people saying like interesting enigmatic stuff, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. It is Petrified Forest mixed with Sunrise.
Mixed with Sunrise.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
It's about a night of two people falling in love, going
True.
around, going to the carnival. One of them's
Right.
kind of scummy, you know.
Yeah, yeah. A little bit of like La de Lant, also like kind of like French, just Frenchness.
Outside of its Frenchness, I guess.
But also just, I feel like La de Land has that scene where there's like the annoying guy who's like trying to sell stuff, who's like tries to like worm his way onto the boat. And this feels like
That's
it has
right,
a lot
yeah.
of just like, this has, there's a lot of like scummy characters in it, I guess. As befitting a sort of noirish crime movie.
Yeah, and so, you said the magic word. This movie is kind of positioned as one of the early noir films. I don't really know what qualifies a noir film, but
I mean,
I
it's-
did see the shadows of slatted window shades on people.
There you go. But I mean, like, they had those in, von Stroheim movies and those old news.
Yeah.
I think like the sort of most, I guess, like established sort of ground rules for film noir as a genre, as like the film noir period, is post World War II American films influenced by European filmmakers that are about crime.
Okay. Well, so this is the stuff that influenced them, I guess.
Right, yeah.
Does noir have to be American? I mean, noir is like literally a French word in this context.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, that's sort of how noir started, is like the post-war crime, like melodramas. But then it is like people can still make movies that are film noir now. Like anyone, and I view film noir more as like a vibe than anything else.
Right.
So
I mean, aren't there a lot of like classic noir movies that are from during the war?
Yeah, there's that too. So that's why it's sort of like the rules of sort of like the classic noir period is like, all right, sure, but there were movies before that did stuff, and there were movies after that, movies from other countries, and all of that. So I tend to view film noir as a pretty loose definition. In which case, I think this movie absolutely qualifies.
I mean, this movie has people saying, "Dames, you're all alike,"
Right?
Which you can't get more noir than somebody saying "dames" or "broads are all the same."
Yeah. It's got murder in it. It's got bodies are discovered.
It's got a cute dog that follows the main character wherever he goes.
This has been 1938 has been a good year for dogs in film. Between Little Rascals, Bring Up Baby, and Port of Shadows.
Oh, I was going to mention the cat in the Little Rascals Practical Jokers thing is called Baby.
You're right. Baby is just what people call cats of any size, I guess.
Or maybe it was a reference. I don't know.
Oh, wow. I mean,
I
hadn't
didn't
even thought of
check
that,
the dates to find out.
It could easily be. Yeah.
But yeah, the dog in this movie is like, this movie starts with Jean Gabin's character like hitching a ride on a dark road with a guy driving a truck, and the guy tries to make conversation with him, and he's too full of ennui and solitude to answer many questions. But what he does do is grab the steering wheel to swerve the car out of the way so he doesn't hit a dog.
Yeah.
And then the two of them are about to fight over it, and it's just like, let's not fight. Have some cigarettes.
Yeah. C'est la vie. Probably the next main character after Jean is Nellie, who is, I wouldn't necessarily really call her like a femme fatale. She seems kind of too...
There's nothing really fatale about her.
Right, she's not actually that dangerous. She's just caught up in dangerous happenings. But she's introduced wearing this like transparent raincoat that absolutely rules. It's the coolest shit.
I couldn't tell if it was shiny or if it was transparent,
Both.
just based on the way the black and white was.
Yeah, it's a like translucent, shiny like trench coat. It's great.
It was cool. It was kind of Blade Runner-y.
Right,
honestly.
and it's like this movie's from 1938. I didn't think that people had like transparent
Like plastic.
coats. Yeah. So that's very cool. And she has this like Godfather guy,
Guardian,
right? Who's like
Yeah.
kind of a creep and also a murderer, and that's sort of a thread throughout the movie. Once again, this movie's not super plotty. It's a lot of it is, like you said, a lot of characters either standing or sitting in rooms and smoking and like discussing how hard life is.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't call it like, that description makes it sound like a bit more nebulous of a movie than it is, because there's always
There
something
is plot,
happening.
yeah.
Yeah. I feel like this movie could very easily like dip into just this kind of aimlessness. But I don't like, and it's just people sitting around talking. And I think the people sitting around talking is a great part of this movie, but I never felt like, I just felt like I was getting to know like the cast of characters around this kind of seedy area. Like there are characters that you familiarize yourself that where, they don't necessarily even go anywhere. Like the guy who keeps trying to get a hotel room or whatever, but like you're just kind of soaking in a vibe. I think it works very well. I love it.
Yeah. There's the gang of kind of local tough guys, led by Lucien.
Tough in quotes. Yeah.
Yeah, right, because like as soon as they are confronted by anyone or anything, they fold immediately. They're the most
and
cowardly
get laughed
criminals.
At.
Yeah. But then he's doing stuff like he's cutting lines at bumper cars, which is like, who does that,
That's not nice.
As per a sort of French noirish crime movie, does not have a happy ending. Has quite a tragic ending. But I feel like if this movie ended any other way, it would feel wrong. Like this movie needs to end on this note of just like, that is life. There is no
sucks.
There is no life without death.
Yeah. The person who was the painter who was speaking of death, like the painter who was spouting off like the most ennui soaked lines. He doesn't see the point in living, and so they're like the main character, like he needs some civvies, some civilian clothes. The painter goes, that guy's the same shoe size as me, I guess I'll kill myself now.
Well, because you get the impression he was probably going to do that anyway, and he does that by just swimming out into the ocean, like,
yeah,
and he's just never heard of again. But he leaves behind all his clothes and his belongings. So then Jean, who's sort of implied, I think, to have like he's a deserter, like he ran away from the army, so he needs to ditch his uniform and like he needs a new identity. So he kind of takes he takes the painter's identity, and he's gonna hop another ship out of there. But Lucien, the not very tough guy, ends up shooting him in the back out of jealousy and revenge, because he made him look a fool at the bumper cars.
You got to look very serious and professional while you're doing bumper cars.
Yeah, but then there's the whole thing where Nellie's been like searching for her ex this whole time, and she finds out that he was murdered by her godfather out of jealousy, and so then Jean shows up and kills the godfather, Zabel, with a brick while choir music plays on the radio, which is a very evocative scene.
That scene also is presaged by a Chekhov's box cutter.
Yeah.
Just another more conspicuous shots of meaningful items.
Yeah. Yes, I think I mentioned La La Land briefly before. This movie reminded me of that movie a bit in kind of its style and vibes, I guess, but it definitely held my attention a lot more. I think it's definitely less abstract and a kind of more focused narrative movie, as opposed to just like, life in a boat, what's that like? Whereas this is like, no, this is characters that like do things and have relationships with each other.
Yeah. I love the grit in this movie.
Yeah, it's a lot of like real locations out there on like industrial ports and cranes and foggy boats and stuff. I dug it.
Yeah, I saw on Letterboxd that you gave this 3.5 stars. I gave it 4.5.
Whoa!
I liked it a lot.
Um,
And I guess we can get into favorites then. That was my favorite of this year. What was
that was
yours?
your favorite. I think my favorite
Yes.
was Bring Up Baby. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Bring Up Baby would be my favorite if I wasn't so stressed out while I was watching it.
Thing is, like, I don't think it is. The characters in it are always very stressed out, but I was always kind of delighted by how stressed out they were becoming, as opposed to getting stressed myself.
Right.
But it's definitely, it's a very manic film for sure. But I'm excited to see more like manic Howard Hawks stuff, and I'm excited to see more sort of dark, moody French crime stuff.
I know. We're definitely going to have to make sure to put some emphasis on European film as, we get into the Hayes era further, I think
Hollywood
this
is blowing up so much that we gotta keep ourselves balanced a little bit.
I think my position on the Hayes Code is that it is a bit overblown, exactly like how much it destroyed cinema, because
I think, and once we get to some like American noir movies, I'm get to talk about this more too, of how they weren't allowed to be as explicit about certain things, but it made people come up with more creative workarounds for stuff. And so there's just these incredibly innuendo drenched dialogue scenes in some noir movies that are great because they're just well written. And if they weren't forced to do that by the Hayes Code, those might not have existed.
Yeah. But regardless, it's nice to have a contrast with some European movies.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that about does it for 1938. Thanks for sticking with us while we took a while to get to this one.
Yeah, a little hiatus, but
a lot of life garbage got in the way.
Yeah.
But we're gonna swiftly move on to 39, I think, which is gonna be a banger year. A banner year.
39 is going to be a big ol' episode, I'm sure.
Yes. 39 is going to be another 27.
Yeah. And it's when the end of the decades, they're just pulling out all the stops. It's
they're like, dang, we're about to change a tens place. We got to really do some big showstopper movies.
It does kind of feel like that's just a thing that happens though. Cause 99 also one of the best years for movies ever. I think
82, it does not count. 82 is one of the big years.
89 is a fairly big year for movies also. 69 certainly is.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Even though I think Easy Rider is boring.
I don't know if there's it. I mean, I'm kind of with you there, but we'll get to it. I don't know if that theory holds that much water, but it's something to keep in mind, I guess.
We'll keep it in mind when we get to 1949, which I can't think of anything that was released.
Yeah, me neither.
All right. Well, that'll do it. Thanks for joining us on this sub 2 hour episode. What?
How did we do it?
And check out our YouTube, our Instagram, our podcasts.
Yeah.
Did you know that we have a podcast that you're listening to right now? Check it out. With all that being said, Glenn, I will see you next year.
See you next year.
Susan, I will not be involved in any more of your harebrained schemes.
But it's not a harebrained scheme. Imagine Aunt Elizabeth coming to this apartment running smack into a leper. That would be an end of my $1 million.
Elizabeth,
If you had known it was going to give you $1 million if she liked you and you knew she wouldn't like you if she wanted to live in your apartment, what would you do?
I don't know.